There's a question that has haunted people for centuries. What's the fastest way to get rich? Most people spend their entire lives chasing the answer. Yet the truth has always been sitting right in front of them. The reason so few ever find it is simple. The people already at the top don't want the rules of the game exposed. Because the moment you truly understand how wealth is built, you stop playing by their rules and start creating your own. Here's the first truth you need to hear. Riches do not automatically go to the smartest person in the room. And they definitely do not always go to the hardest worker. If hard work alone created wealth, then teachers, nurses, and laborers would be some of the richest people alive. But that's not how the world works. Wealth moves toward power. That's the principle most people miss. Centuries ago, Niccolò Machiavelli made this idea painfully clear. In The Prince, he revealed something timeless. Money follows those who understand control, influence, and timing. Wealth flows to the person who can shape outcomes, guide people, and recognize opportunity before the crowd even notices it. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Most people will never become rich, not because they lack ability, but because they are trapped in the wrong mindset. They've been taught that money comes from playing it safe, from spending decades at a job, from saving every rupee, every dollar, every paycheck, hoping one day it adds up to freedom. But from a Machiavellian lens, that's the slowest road possible. Safe is slow, bold is fast. Burn that into your mind. The people who rise the fastest are rarely the ones waiting for certainty. They are the ones willing to make moves others are too afraid to make. They step where others hesitate. They act while everyone else is still analyzing. Think about the people who seem to suddenly become wealthy one year. No one knows their name the next year. They're everywhere building companies, dominating headlines, living a completely different life. To most people, it looks like magic. But it isn't magic, it's strategy. Behind every rapid rise is a system of leverage, positioning, and calculated boldness. And that's exactly what we're going to break down. Let's start with the biggest lie that keeps people poor. Most people believe wealth comes from working harder. They think more hours means more money. More hustle means more success. More effort means faster results. But here's the reality. Hard work by itself often keeps you trapped. Look around. Some of the hardest working people in society are often the least wealthy. Why? Because they are selling their time. And time is limited. When you trade hours for money, your income will always have a ceiling. There are only so many hours in a day. The wealthy, on the other hand, do something different. They don't just sell labor. They build leverage. They exchange ideas, systems, ownership, and influence for money. Machiavelli would likely put it this way. The man who works for another remains dependent. But the man who makes systems and people work for him becomes powerful. That is the real divide. The poor often sell effort. The rich build structures. This is where the power principle comes in. Control creates wealth. If you want to rise quickly, you must place yourself where your decisions move money, not just your physical effort. The wealthy don't simply work harder. They position themselves at the top of systems. They own assets. They lead teams. They direct attention. They influence markets. And once you control a system, wealth can multiply far faster than labor ever could. There's also a psychological reason this works. People naturally follow certainty. Human beings are wired to respond to confidence. direction, and leadership. When someone moves with conviction, others rally around them. They give attention. They give trust. They give resources. Sometimes they even give money. And once that flow starts, it compounds. That's why influence often creates wealth. Faster than effort. Now let's talk about what happens when someone chooses the wrong path. The slow path feels comfortable. A stable job, predictable income. No risk, but often that comfort becomes a cage. Imagine giving 30 or 40 years of your life to building someone else's empire, only to reach the end with barely enough freedom to enjoy what's left. That's not wealth. That's survival disguised as security. And the most painful part is this. While you are building someone else's dream, they are using your time to accelerate their own fortune. That's why so many people eventually ask themselves, why them and not me? The answer is rarely luck. More often it's design. The wealthy position themselves where every system works in their favor. Their money earns money. Their reputation opens doors. Their network creates momentum. Everything compounds meanwhile. The average person remains trapped in a cycle where every year looks almost identical to the last. So what's the alternative? Stop asking, how can I make money? Start asking, how can I build power? Because power attracts money. When you control attention, resources, access, or opportunity, money naturally follows. Look at business leaders. Look at media figures. Look at industry dominators. Very few got there by simply working harder than everyone else. They rose by controlling the environment around them. They stepped into arenas where leverage existed. They moved decisively. They took ownership. That's why one of the fastest escalators to wealth is ownership of a business. Ownership of digital attention. Ownership of systems. Ownership of assets. This is where speed begins. Instead of being the worker inside the machine, become the one who owns the machine. And here are the practical principles you need to start applying. First, build leverage, not labor. Shift your thinking from worker to owner. Ask yourself, what can continue generating value, even when I'm not actively working? That could be content, a business, a digital asset, a product, or an audience. Second, move boldly. Perfect timing is a myth. Most people drown in hesitation. The people who rise quickly are usually the ones who move, while others are still doubting. Third, controlled perception. In the modern world, perception is often power. If people see you as credible, sharp, and trustworthy, opportunities come faster. Customers buy, partners reach out. Investors listen. Fourth, remove yourself from dead environments. If your current environment has no room for scale, growth, or leverage, staying there too long can cost you years. Sometimes the fastest move is simply changing the arena. Because speed in wealth is often less about effort and more about positioning. When you start applying these principles, something changes. You stop chasing money, and slowly money begins chasing you. Doors open. People notice momentum, opportunities appear. The same world that once ignored you starts responding differently. And that shift is where acceleration begins. But understand this, the fast rise is not easy. Bold movement creates attention. Attention creates envy the moment you begin rising. People will question you, some will doubt you. Some will criticize you. Some will secretly hope you fail. That resistance is part of the process. In many ways, it's proof that you're finally moving. Because people rarely attack what feels irrelevant. So if you want the fastest path to wealth, you need to stop thinking like a servant and start thinking like a strategist. Your mind must become sharper than your effort. Your decisions must become stronger than your fears. And your actions must become faster than the average person's hesitation. That is where speed lives. That is where wealth accelerates. And that is where the gain truly begins. Now that we've broken down the mindset behind fast wealth, let's go deeper into what actually separates people who stay stuck from those who rise quickly. The difference is not luck. It's not talent alone. And it's definitely not just hard work. The real difference is understanding what game you are playing. Most people are trapped in survival mode. They wake up, go to work, pay bills, repeat the cycle, and call that life. But from a Machiavellian perspective, survival is not a strategy for wealth. It is a strategy for staying exactly where you are. The poor play survival, the wealthy play expansion. That distinction changes everything. When your mind is focused only on survival, every decision is driven by fear of loss. Fear of failure. Fear of what others will think. Fear of making the wrong move. And fear makes people slow. It makes them hesitate. It makes them wait for certainty that never comes. But wealth moves toward expansion. Expansion requires boldness. It requires the willingness to act before everything feels safe. Machiavelli understood this deeply. He believed fortune favored the one who acted with force and confidence, not recklessly but decisively. That's the mindset shift you need. Stop asking, how do I stay safe? Start asking, how do I expand faster? Because wealth is rarely built by people who are simply trying to protect what little they have. It is built by people who are focused on multiplying. Here's where most people destroy their own momentum. They wait for the perfect time. They say things like, I'll start when I have more money. I'll start when I know more. I'll start when the market is better. I'll start when life becomes easier. But that moment almost never comes. Waiting feels intelligent. But most of the time, it's just fear, wearing the mask of logic. The people who move fast understand something different. They act early. They test quickly. They adjust in motion. By the time everyone else finally decides to move, the opportunity is already gone. Think about every major trend, every exploding niche, every fast-growing platform. The biggest winners are almost always the first movers. Not because they are always the smartest, but because they were willing to act before the crowd. By the time the average person feels comfortable, the leverage is gone. This is why speed of decision matters. Your ability to decide quickly often determines how fast wealth enters your life. Money follows momentum. People follow momentum too. When someone moves with confidence, others naturally pay attention. That attention becomes trust. That trust becomes leverage. And leverage turns into wealth. Let's go deeper into the psychology behind this. People are drawn to certainty. Even if someone doesn't have every answer, confidence itself creates attraction. Think about leaders, entrepreneurs, creators, and business builders. The ones who rise fast usually move with conviction. They don't constantly broadcast doubt. They make decisions. They communicate direction. And that creates gravity. People want to work with them. Buy from them, follow them. Invest in them. That is how influence compounds. But there's a brutal consequence. If you ignore this principle, you become invisible, and invisibility is one of the most expensive states in life. When nobody notices your movement, no doors open, no one reaches out, no opportunities multiply. You blend into the crowd of cautious people who spend years planning but never executing. That's why hesitation is dangerous. Not because every move must succeed, but because inaction guarantees stagnation. So what's the alternative? Develop a bias for action. This means when an idea has potential, you move quickly, not after weeks of overthinking, not after months of research. You test it, you launch it. You learn in motion. Execution creates clarity. Overthinking creates paralysis. Here are the practical tactics that accelerate this process. First, act within 24 hours. If you have an idea for a channel, product, service, or business move, take one action within the next day. Post the first video, reach out to the first client. Build the first landing page. Test the first offer. Momentum starts with movement. Second, use fear as a signal. Most people interpret fear as a reason to stop. But often fear is simply a sign that growth is nearby. The moves that scare you the most are often the ones with the highest upside. Third, place yourself in fast-moving arenas. Speed matters. Some niches scale much faster than others. Technology, media, finance, digital products, attention-based businesses. These are arenas where one bold move can create massive results. A single video can reach millions. A single product can scale globally. A single idea can explode. This is why positioning matters. You cannot expect fast wealth in a slow environment. Fourth, use other people's resources. This is where many people stay stuck. They think they need to do everything alone. But speed often comes from leverage. Other people's skills, other people's money, other people's networks, other people's audiences. Smart partnerships can compress years into months. When you begin applying these principles, people start to see you differently. They notice movement. They notice energy. They notice momentum. And momentum itself attracts more momentum. This is why people who begin rising often appear to accelerate faster and faster. Success compounds, but let's talk about something most people never prepare for. When you begin moving fast, resistance increases. People will doubt you. Some will call you reckless. Some will say you changed. Some will secretly resent your progress. This is normal. Rapid movement makes people uncomfortable, especially those who stayed still. At first they laugh, then they criticize. Then they envy, and eventually they imitate. That pattern happens again and again. First doubt, then envy, then imitation. So don't be surprised when the same people who questioned you later ask, "How you did it now? Let's go one level deeper." True, speed comes from influencing the movement of others. This is where real power begins. Think about generals in war. They don't fight every battle personally. They direct forces. They multiply outcomes through people. The same principle applies to wealth. The moment you learn how to guide people toward your vision, your speed increases exponentially. This could mean employees, freelancers, partners, audience members, community, or even followers online. Influence is acceleration. When 10 people move in alignment with your direction, your results multiply. This is why leadership is one of the most valuable wealth skills in existence. The lone wolf can move fast, but a strategist with aligned people moves far faster. Now imagine the end result. You're no longer chasing small wins. You're building systems. People seek your guidance. Opportunities come to you. Money becomes a byproduct of momentum. That is where fast wealth begins to feel real. Because once influence is established, money can be recreated repeatedly. That's the real secret. The wealthy are not confident because of money. They are confident because they know how to create it. Again, they understand the levers. They understand people, they understand attention. And once you understand those, speed becomes repeatable, so stop waiting. Pick one move you've been delaying and make it today. Not tomorrow, not next week. Today, because wealth rarely waits for the cautious. It moves toward the daring. And the faster you train yourself to move decisively, the faster your life begins to change. Now let's go deeper into the real engine behind fast wealth, because mindset and bold action are only the beginning. The true force that creates rapid riches is leverage. This is the principle that separates people who work for money from people who make money work for them. Think of leverage like a simple machine. With the right lever, a small push can move something massive. Without it, you can spend your whole life pushing with all your strength and still barely make progress. Wealth works exactly the same way. Most people try to build riches with raw effort alone. They trade time for money. They work longer hours. They push harder, they grind endlessly. But the smartest people don't rely only on effort. They find the lever, and once they do, every move produces results far bigger than the energy invested. This is why some people appear to rise overnight. They are not always working more. They are often using stronger leverage. Machiavelli understood this principle long before the modern world gave it a name: rulers. Kings and leaders never fought every battle with their own hands. They used alliances, resources, influence, reputation, fear, respect. All of these were forms of leverage. Today, the tools may look different, but the principle remains exactly the same. In the modern world, there are 4 major forms of leverage that can dramatically accelerate wealth. Money people, knowledge and attention. Let's start with money leverage. This means using capital to create more capital. The average person thinks, I need to save enough before I start. The wealthy think differently. They ask, who can invest? Who can fund this? How can this asset generate returns? Money becomes a tool, not a goal. Used correctly, capital speeds everything up. One investment can produce income for years. One calculated move can create compounding returns. That's why wealth often grows exponentially once the first layer is built. Next comes people leverage. This is where speed truly explodes. Alone, your output is limited. With the right people around you, your impact multiplies. One person can edit. One can manage systems. One can handle operations. One can grow the audience. One can sell. Suddenly, what would have taken 1 year alone can happen in 1 month. This is why CEOs, Founders and creators who scale fast rarely do everything themselves. They build teams. They build systems around talent. They direct movement, rather than personally executing every task. That's power. Then comes knowledge leverage. This is not just about learning. It's about knowing what matters before everyone else does. Information becomes valuable when it gives you timing. Knowing which niche is rising before it explodes. Knowing what audience demand is increasing. Knowing where attention is shifting. Knowing what problem people are desperate to solve. This is why people who spot trends early often become wealthy quickly. They move before the crowd arrives. And finally, there is attention leverage. This may be the most powerful tool in the modern world. Attention is currency. If you can consistently capture attention, you can convert it into almost anything. Sales, partnerships, authority influence, audience trust for a YouTube creator. This is especially powerful. One piece of content can reach thousands. One viral video can reach millions. One message can create brand deals, clients' products, and recurring revenue. That is leverage. One massive outcome. This is why content creation has become one of the fastest wealth-building vehicles in the digital era. But here's where most people make the mistake. They try to do everything alone. They insist on carrying the full weight themselves. They become the writer-editor strategist, marketer and operator all at once. This slows growth dramatically. Machiavelli would see this as weakness, not because effort is bad, but because refusing leverage limits speed. The person who insists on moving alone moves like a snail. The person who multiplies through systems moves like a storm. Now let's talk about the psychology behind why this works. People are naturally attracted to movement and strength. When they see someone building momentum, they want to be part of it. That's why fast-rising people attract collaborators, clients, followers, and supporters. Momentum creates gravity, and gravity pulls opportunity toward you. The opposite is also true. If you stay invisible, no one knows what to align with. That's why perception matters. Machiavelli famously understood that appearances often shape reality if people perceive you as rising. Powerful and capable, they begin treating you that way. Doors open faster, trust builds quicker. People offer opportunities more easily. In many cases, reputation moves money before results even arrive. This is why branding, confidence, and online presence matter so much. A strong brand can accelerate wealth faster than pure skill alone. Now let's address the harder truth. Fast growth also creates resistance. The higher you rise, the more visible you become. Visibility creates attention. Attention creates criticism. Some people will doubt you. Some will envy you. Some will try to compete. Some may even attempt sabotage. This is normal. Rapid progress often creates enemies, just as quickly as it creates admirers. Machiavelli warned repeatedly that power attracts opposition. So if resistance increases, it often means you are finally becoming visible. Enough to matter. The key is not to fear that resistance. Use it as confirmation that you are moving. Now imagine the end game. You've built leverage. You've built systems. You've built attention. You've built influence. At this point, money stops being the main pursuit. It becomes the byproduct. That's the level where wealth begins to scale fast. Because once you understand the system, you can recreate it repeatedly. That is the real difference between people who get lucky once and people who stay wealthy. The wealthy understand the mechanism. They know how to generate momentum again and again. And again, that's why they never rely on one opportunity. They create opportunities. So here's the final truth. The fastest way to get rich is not random. It is engineered. It comes down to 3 things. Position. Place yourself in a niche or industry where scale exists. Perception. Build authority, trust, and attention so opportunities flow toward you. Precision. Act boldly and quickly when the right moment appears. That's how fast wealth is built. Not through endless labor. Not through waiting. Not through fear. But through leveraged timing and decisive movement. From a Machiavellian lens, the world rewards those who understand power and move with confidence. The people who seem to rise overnight are usually the ones who spend time sharpening the blade, building leverage, and then striking at exactly the right moment. And when they move so fast. The world calls it luck when it was never luck. It was strategy, it was positioning. It was boldness. It was timing, and now you understand the game.